we'll kick things off by talking about Red Bull and their chances for 2019. Now, I covered it in Friday's news roundup, Dan. Red Bull have been massively vocal lately, haven't they, about how confident they are with this Honda engine, and they think that if they can deliver a decent engine next year with their chassis design the way it is, they could actually go on and make Max Verstappen F1's youngest ever world champion. Before we get into the proper nitty-gritty of it, what are your initial reactions to that? Are you as confident as they are?
Uh, hmm, Probably not as confident as they are to the public. I would say. I'm sure behind closed doors they're not quite as confident, I'd guess. But you know what? It does look quite promising. If you'd have asked me halfway through the season, I'd have gone, nah, I'm not really too sure. But over these past few Grand Prix, it's starting to look like it might work. So initial thoughts, yeah, I'm really intrigued with this one.
Yeah, I'm certainly more confident than I was when the deal was first announced. I think when it was first announced, I thought, I couldn't see them being much worse than they are now, even with Honda power and that chassis being so good. I thought they'd be able to at least be third. But with the way that they're sort of developing the engine, because they're throwing stuff at that Toro Rosso now to make sure that Honda engine is going to be okay for next year, they've kind of sort of got early testing almost, haven't they? So I'm a little bit more positive for them for next year. Whether or not I think they can go for the title, I'm not convinced. I'd like to. I mean, I'm sure you're the same, Dan. 3 teams up there fighting for the World Championship. Well,
Definitely.
10 teams fighting for the World Championship would be fantastic. But, I think the title maybe in their first season with Honda is a little bit of a stretch. But what concerns me about it, to be honest, is it does have all the makings of a McLaren Honda. They seem to be setting themselves up for quite a fall.
Yeah, that's the big question mark at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I don't think it'll be quite as bad as the McLaren situation. And I know if Jonty was here, he'd be saying that, Red Bull will work closely with Honda, whereas McLaren, it was a very fractured relationship almost straight away. So I'm more hopeful than the McLaren situation, but we shouldn't rule it out. We got to think back to 2015. Everyone thought, you know what? McLaren, give them at least a year just to settle in, and then they'll be right on the money. And you know what? I was that guy as well. Even that second season, I thought, you know what, this year, Honda, keep your eye on them. But it never quite happened. And this year does seem to be Honda's best year. But I think you're right. You really can't discount that this has a huge potential to all completely go wrong.
I think that's the concern, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the development that Honda made under McLaren, they never really, even when they got it right, they kind of started to move forward in 2016, but then fell back again in 2017. But what Red Bull are saying they're going to do differently is they're kind of saying to Honda, build the engine, we will make our car fit it. Whereas apparently McLaren was saying, we've built the car, you make the engine fit it. So that could really play to their strengths. But that Red Bull is so tightly packaged, and if that Honda has any kind of overheating issues, they're going to really struggle next year. I mean, we saw with McLaren in winter testing with Renault, didn't we? The burn marks on the side, I think it was Stoffel Van Dorn's McLaren, how badly these cars can overheat. So they've got to get this aero right, Red Bull, and I'm a little bit concerned that they're not going to be as, lenient, if you like, with Honda as perhaps they're making out. I worry they are going to sort of say to us or to the public, we are building this car. As long as the Honda engine fits, we're happy. We'll change the back end if we need to. But I can't help but feel that behind closed doors, Adrian Newey is saying, right, Honda, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and I want you to do the other. And that really could properly screw them over in the end.
Yeah, it could. And like you say, Adrian Newey is a big player in all this. I mean, if you're Honda, yes, you want to put in the best engine. But if Adrian Newey's telling you, this just isn't going to work with our car, and this component, yes, it's going to make us go quicker, but it's going to screw something else up. I mean, it's a real challenge for both parties, really, to try and sort this out. But I think it could work. And I think Adrian Newey himself, he's been in this business a very long time now. He knows what he's doing. One of the best minds in Formula One. So I think if anyone's going to make that situation work in terms of aerodynamically and packing the car in, I think Adrian Newey's the man. So on that side of things, I'm quite optimistic, but it's just whether Honda can really put all the pieces together to make something really special.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the rule changes next year, haven't we, with aero? So it surprises me that Red Bull have been quite so confident. I mean, we know they can build a very good chassis. They've proven that. And Christian Horner has pretty much religiously said if they can get to sort of half a second off Mercedes and Ferrari in terms of the Honda power, then their chassis should make up the rest. We saw that in Mexico, didn't we, when the engines were sort of leveled out a little bit more because of the altitude. But I think to come out sort of bigging yourself up in November, just before a whopping great, well, not a whopping great rule change, but a fairly significant rule change. When you look at what happened with McLaren, I think it's a dangerous game to play, and I'm a little bit concerned that they're setting the bar a little, setting the bar a little bit too high, if you know what I mean. Sort of, if they'd have said, I think we'll be third next year, we'll go for second, but I think third is probably where we'll end up. And then if they go on and do fight for the championship, everyone's going to go, wow, what a season. Whereas now, I'm going to look at the end of 2019, if they're miles off in third place and just clinging on to it, I'm going to turn around and say, well, that's a poor season based on what they told us they were looking for. Same with McLaren, when they were sort of giving it all this, we will challenge for wins in 2018 when they switched to Renault, or we'd be challenging Red Bull for podiums at least and going for third in the championship. And had they done that, you'd say, yep, they've hit their target. But because they came in and went all out with that, they've had a terrible season as far as I'm concerned. Whereas if they've been modest, I think that's the word I'm looking for, come in with a bit of modesty and aim realistically rather than setting that bar too high.
Yeah, I think you're perfectly right. That was very well put.
Thank you.
Well, it was. I mean, if you got your sensible head screwed on, shouting to the hills that you're going to be fighting for the world championship is a crazy thing to do anyway in Formula One. Even if they stayed with Renault, that would have been a crazy assumption to make. So to make it with all these new potential issues coming in, brand new partners, it seems like a crazy statement. They've got the driver to do it. I think Verstappen is definitely one of the best on the grid and is more than capable of doing it, even in maybe a slightly subpar car. But I mean, compared to the Mercedes and Ferrari, that is. But to claim that you're going to make this almost a second jump is crazy. And yes, at Mexico, they were right up there with the chassis. In Monaco, they're right up there. At Singapore, they're right up there. But you think at tracks like Monza, that's a hell of a lot of time you've got to make up just with a slight aero change and with a brand new engine. That's a hell of a lot of time you've got to be making up. So it's a dangerous game they're playing, Red Bull, but they don't mind doing it sometimes. So it's a complete guessing game. It really is. But to say they're going to be fighting in the World Championship next year, unfortunately, sounds great, but I really don't think it's going to happen.
See, Haley's taken my 25-minute statement there and turned it into two very, very nice short sentences. So, hello, Haley, by the way. She says, in the end, just keep expectations low. Don't pull a McLaren this year and say they can fight. Keep expectations low, and then everyone will be surprised and happy. That's the thing, is I know Red Bull have got to keep sponsors happy. I mean, you have to look at it from a business perspective. If Red Bull turn around and go, yeah, we'll be 7th next year, sponsors aren't going to be overly pleased with that. So they've got to aim a little bit high, but don't go crazy with expectations. But at the same time, hope I'm wrong. I really do. And of course, that is going to now trigger the Red Bull Verstappen fanboy comments. But as I said a little bit earlier in the stream, I want as many teams up there fighting for races and championships as possible. Look how good Mexico was. But 2019 to me seems way too early for Red Bull and Honda. They've not... Yes, they're working with Toro Rosso, but that engine has not been in the back, as far as I'm aware, of this year's Red Bull at any point.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it has either.
So it's kind of like, I guess the point I'm making is it's one thing saying this is what it's doing in the Toro Rosso, this is what it's doing on the bench, completely different to this is what it'll do in the back of our car. You know, that Toro Rosso is a very nicely packaged car, but nowhere near as aggressive as Red Bull will want to go next year, and will have to go if they want their chassis to be the difference.